What's going on, guys? Sam from Tuned Auto. This video took me forever to make, and I apologize for that, but it's finished and I hope you enjoy it. But today we're going to be tackling the rear diff bushings in my F82 M4. So this is kind of like a hybrid attempt at doing this. It's not as complex as BMW's procedure, and I wouldn't say it's as complex as ECS's method of doing this as well. It's kind of like a hybrid. A huge shout out to the guys on the F80 forums for helping me put this together. Some of you had some tips and tricks, and I kind of did a hybrid of basically all the solutions I found. So let's just dive right into it.
So the easiest way to tell if your bushing is cracked is to grab a flashlight, jack the car up, and just give a visual inspection. Right off the bat, here on mine, I could see that there was a big crack along the top. And this is, again, super common with these F80 series chassis cars. So BMW actually recognized this, and they updated the part. So if you have a vehicle production date of 2018 or newer, so July 18 or newer, then you have the new upgraded poly mount. And if you have a car older than that, then chances are you have this old rubber style mount. And I mean, even low mileage cars I've seen with cracking issues, so I wouldn't be surprised if yours is original. It more than likely is starting to crack. During inspection, if you found that your bushing is cracked, you have a few options. So this first one is one that I probably wouldn't recommend, but what you could do is you could replace your cracked rubber bushing with a brand new factory one. Again, I wouldn't recommend this just given the poor longevity that we've seen with this part. The second option would be to install the OEM poly mount that BMW introduced to replace the older rubber style mount. I didn't go this route just because I did not have a special tool to be able to press this into the subframe. So to kind of avoid that kind of installation step or any additional tools, I went with the purple Power Flex bushings, which are also poly, 25% stiffer than stock. There is no additional drivetrain noise, and they're incredibly easy to install. With a two-piece design to them, you can press fit them in with your hand. You lubricate them, push in both sides, and then slide in the metal sleeve. So again, it's incredibly easy to install these, and they were a perfect solution for what I was looking for. The last option, if you're looking to stiffen the differential even more, you can go with a company that has designed a dual mount bracket. So this allows you to utilize both holes in the subframe, and because by default BMW only utilizes the hole on the left. So again, with this custom diff bracket, you can install a bushing on both holes and add that extra stiffness to your differential. While we are in there replacing the rear diff bushing, we are also going to replace the 4 bushings in the front. So I will show you how to do both. Upon visual inspection, I didn't really see any cracking in these front bushings, but just given the amount of work to tackle the rear bushing, you might as well do the 4 in the front as well. If you are doing this repair with a quick jack, just note that the outer V-brace bolt is covered by the frame of the quick jack, so just make sure you remove that before you lift the car. So once we have both V-braces removed, we need to gain access to the drive shaft, and in order to do that, I'm going to remove the exhaust as well as the 4 heat shields covering it. So luckily I have a single mid-pipe conversion, so removing the exhaust is incredibly easy. And I've removed all of the heat shields, and you can see the drive shaft is exposed, and we also have a nice view of the front mounting plate as well. Now that everything is out of the way, we are ready to lower the subframe. So you have your 4 points, one there, one in the front, and obviously the same thing on the other side. We have a mounting point here and another in the front. Before dropping the subframe, you must remove the ground strap from the body. In order to drop the subframe, we are actually going to partially drop it. We are going to utilize the OEM repair bolt from BMW. I will include the part numbers in the description. You also have a washer you need to utilize with these bolts, but these bolts are around 2 inches bigger than the factory subframe bolts, so it allows you to lower the subframe enough to access the bushings without removing the subframe fully from the vehicle. At this point, I actually stopped recording because I had so much difficulty removing the subframe bolts. My recommendation is make sure you have your Etorx sockets in 1/2 inch. I made the rookie mistake. I had them in 3/8 and it was incredibly difficult to remove. But once you have the ability to remove them, the process is pretty straightforward to installing those bolts. You can see here I have one of the jack point on the driver's side lifted on the subframe. So once you have the subframe supported, you can start removing the subframe bolts on that side. So I would remove the rear subframe bolt, reinstall with a repair bolt, move on to the front one, do the same thing, remove the subframe bolt, reinstall one of the repair bolts, and then I can lower the jack on that side and the subframe will drop a couple inches on that side, and it will allow me to move on to the passenger side until the entire subframe has been dropped onto the repair bolts. So BMW actually recommends to replace all 4 subframe bolts, and I can totally see why. I made the mistake of not buying them, and then of course I called the dealership to order them the day of, and they had none in stock. So I'm going to soak these in PB Blaster and see if I can kind of bring some life back to them. Due to the high torque spec of this rear diff mount bolt, I'm going to loosen it while I still have all 4 repair bolts installed in the subframe. So you may have noticed, but the front mount, the driver's side bolt is blocked by the gas tank, even when the subframe is supported by the repair bolts. So what we're going to do is lower the side a little bit more. In order to do that, we have to remove the top bolts from the rear shock on the driver's side, as well as remove the caliper and place that up on top of the control arms, as well as remove a couple connectors just so we get enough slack to lower that driver's side down enough where we can access those bolts on the front mount. So I know I said we were going to lower the driver's side more, so just to be more specific, we are removing both of the repair bolts and supporting the subframe with a jack so we can access this front bolt. Now we're ready to start removing the front mount for the differential. Use something to support it. Here I'm using a transmission jack. I got this at Harbor Freight for like 150 bucks. Again, once we take off this front mount of the diff, obviously nothing will be supporting it from the front half. So use anything you have to support that, as well as just adjust the subframe as needed until you can access that bolt that is blocked by the gas tank. In order to get the front mount out of the vehicle, we need to remove the drive shaft from the transmission. In order to do this, you'll need to support the transmission with some sort of jack. Again, I started to run out. I had to improvise. I used some wooden blocks, used something that maybe is a little more sturdy in your case. And then once the transmission is supported, you can remove the transmission brace, the mounts, and then remove the drive shaft from the flex disc, and that will allow you to slide the mount over the drive shaft and out of the vehicle. To avoid vibration, we want to make sure that the drive shaft and position of the transmission prop are all in the same position when we reinstall everything. So before you kind of remove the bolts for the flex disc, just take a Sharpie and draw a line all the way down so that when you reinstall, you can line up everything. And again, this will avoid unwanted vibration. You can use whatever tools you want to remove the bushings from the front mount, but in my case, I'm going to use the swabbing kit because it's a perfect solution for removing all 4 of these bushings. Once you have all the new bushings installed on your front brace, you can slide it over the drive shaft back towards the differential, and then you're ready to reinstall everything in the front half. So when reinstalling the flex disc to the transmission and drive shaft, you want to install new bolts as recommended by BMW. So I'm going to do that in this situation, and then from there I can reinstall the brackets and mounts and get the transmission back mounted to the chassis. To keep the brace from moving around, I'm going to install the 2 inner bolts which connect to the diff itself. I don't want to install the outer bolts because we do have to maneuver the diff around in order to install the rear mount. So when it came time to removing the rear mount, my camera actually died, but there's really not too much to this. The swabbing kit that I used earlier does not really work for the rear mount. So what I did was I got a piece of steel piping that's 3-inch inside diameter, and I took some scrap steel I had laying around, and I kind of made a makeshift mount. It kind of worked in my situation. Somehow I ended up pulling the bushing out of its metal sleeve, and I still had to cut the sleeve out of the subframe. So I wouldn't say it really worked. So if you have a better way, I would definitely do that. In this case, it didn't take me too long to do this, but I was able to cut that sleeve and use a chisel and kind of just slide it out of there and then reinstall the new bushing. But before I did that, I used a wire brush and just made sure that there was no sharp metal pieces that may cut or kind of cause grooves in the poly bushing before I installed it. Once you have the rear mount installed in the subframe, you can reinstall the rear diff bolt, and then as well as reinstall the 2 outer front bolts so that we can mount the differential to the subframe, and then we can torque all these bolts down. Now that we have the differential mounted back to the subframe, we are ready to lift the subframe and reinstall everything in reverse order. We can take a similar approach to how we lowered the subframe onto the repair bolts to actually remove the repair bolts and reinstall the stock bolts and lift the subframe up to the chassis.